Hello, my name is Chuck Z. I'm here with my son Adam. Y'all know him as Supreme Wisdom. It's all about how this music all come about, and I'm getting into it. Back when I was 13 years old, we bought these songbooks called Hit Parade. You can buy them just about anywhere. All the teenagers got them back then, so we could sing along with the radio. And as I was thumbing through there and picking up some of the songs, I really wanted to learn the guitar, and I happened to see this coupon in there. It was offered by Sid Margolis. It had a guitar, instruction book, and a record. Getting this is about $39, can you imagine? After learning guitar lessons from Roy Shaw, he teamed me up with a young fella. His name was Arlen Green. He played the steel guitar. We played weddings and parties and all kinds of different dances and stuff like that that people, we kind of advertised. Our name was the Cherry Tones. So after a while playing in these bands, as I grew older, after school I had a job and I met my future wife Kathy, and it was about, after knowing her for about 3 years, we had gotten married. I was about 20 years old, she was 19, and as we got married, of course, comes along family. And I didn't really do much with my music. It always was there, and I always just play. It's kind of like a hobby. But I had noticed that one of my sons, Nick, had potential for drums, so as he grew older, got him playing in the drums, and he eventually got real good at it and could play along with me. But little did I know, one of my youngest sons, that was years later, came along, and I guess you could say we passed the torch. From there on, it's leading us up to where we're going now with this.
Before Adam was born in March of '78, we moved the family to the country. Springfield, Nebraska, population 500. He was baby number 6. He was baptized a couple of weeks later in the Catholic Church. His cousins, Mike and Linda, were chosen as his godparents. All of our kids had opportunities like sports, scouts, music, but Adam was our creative one. He was my artist. Living in a small town was like living in a large family. The kids could play anywhere, but there was one rule. When the streetlights came on, you come home. We try to raise our kids to know God through our faith. At age 7, Adam received his first Holy Communion. At this point, children began to understand the difference between right and wrong.
This is a tale. In the mid-'80s, Mom and Dad both lost their jobs. In 1986, we moved down south to Charleston, South Carolina. The first place we lived was called Northwood Garden Apartments. That's where I met my first friend, Alex Tompkins. He and his brother Max turned me on to some new music. They called it rap. When I first heard it though, I didn't like it. I couldn't understand why, but after a while listening to Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, and Run DMC, it finally grew on me and I eventually changed my mind. As much as we tried to move forward and start a new life though, we were still haunted by the past. Mom and Dad were struggling to make ends meet, and often that led to arguments about money. My friends helped me take my mind off all that though, and I used to write my friend Tammy Sayers back in Nebraska. She's the only pen pal I really had. In those days, my new friends and my old friends helped me keep it together. And they instilled within me that life still goes on. In 1989, Hurricane Hugo hit the coast of South Carolina. It was the start of my 6th grade year, so they just postponed school until all the cleanup was finished. During that time, I was helping my brother Guy in his construction business. We'd patch people's roofs and fix their houses. Since I wasn't really getting paid, he said, when all this is done, we'll go ahead and get you something real cool, man. One day we were in Circuit City and I saw this Casio keyboard. He said, alright. And a couple months later, the keyboard finally came home. I immediately started going through all the rhymes I've been writing since the 4th grade. trying to come up with songs I could use to put an album together. But back then I didn't even have a rap name. I tried coming up with names before, but nothing was really that great. So eventually I stumbled across this book of commonly misspelled words. I guess it was out of desperation. I said, I'm gonna flip these pages, and the first word I see, that's gonna be my name. So I landed in the S section. I saw the word supreme. That was pretty cool, but it was still kind of basic, so I said, I'm gonna do it one more time. My next attempt, I landed in the W section, and I found the word wisdom. So I just put the two words together, supreme wisdom, and that's been my name ever since.
And it just goes to show, it don't take much.
Toward the end of 1990, Mom and Dad's marriage had taken its toll. When Dad moved out of the house, I was pretty certain things were never going to be the same. I didn't want to be a burden or trouble my mom, so after school I just came home and went right to my room and worked on my songs. Two friends I had during that year were Jason Lantank and Nathan Allen. Anytime I finished a song, I'd rap it for them and see what they thought about it. 9 times out of 10, I'd win them over, and eventually we formed a rap group called Brand New Philosophers. Well, 2 years had passed and the promise of a record deal making it big started to fade. My dad was called out on a promise he had made my sister Rana, that when she was 16, she'd be able to go back to Nebraska and see her friends. I went with her, and we stayed with Rana's friend Nikki. There was a week left before school started, and the fair was in town. Nikki made some phone calls, and she was able to track down Tammy Sayers. Her mother said she'd be going to the fair that night. When I walked up to her, she was pretty surprised to see me. Walking home that night after the fair, Nikki asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Without hesitation, I looked at her and I said, "I want to be a rapper." She looked at me and said, "You will." Toward the end of 1992, my brother Guy had a big job to do, so the whole family went to help him that day. It was one of these jobs where you had to clean out the whole house and throw everything into a dumpster in order to get the house ready for a renovation. By chance, I opened up a closet door and I noticed this box of old records. As soon as I saw it, I felt like I just won $1 million. After we got home that day, I started calling pawn shops and asking if they had any DJ equipment. Moneyman Pawn Shop said they had a set of turntables, and around my birthday in '93, I brought them home. Out of 70 records, there was about 25 that had instrumentals on them. I went through all the songs I had and thought about putting together a better demo. I put together a 16-song demo tape with the Sony tape deck. In 1994, I was a sophomore in high school. The art teacher that year was Mr. Rodriguez. The art club sponsored a talent show. Mr. Rod invited anyone who wanted to participate to come audition. That day after school, I went home and put one of the instrumentals onto a tape. I practiced my song for a couple hours, and the next day during art class, I told Mr. Rod I wanted to audition for the talent show. He looked at me and said, "Okay, well, what do you do?" I said, "I rap." He said, "Oh, well, this ought to be interesting." Man, I was nervous. I pushed the play button and started rapping. With a smile on his face, he looked at me and he said, "You're in." As the day got closer, I became more nervous. My sister Rana, who was a senior that year, tried to talk me out of it, saying, "Adam, everybody's gonna laugh at you." I was like, "Nah, man, this is my moment. I gotta get up on that stage, gotta prove myself." They finally introduced me as Supreme Wisdom, and when the beat came on, I took hold of that mic and I fulfilled my destiny. 2 weeks had passed since I debuted my talent on my high school stage. The chorus department was putting on their first annual variety show. Instead of an in-school function, it was going to be held after school at night. The chorus instructor, Miss Harley, liked my performance at the talent show and she invited me to perform that night. Man, I was so amped up, I decided to do an encore performance of Rest in Peace. That night, a bunch of my friends came out to show their support. Vince Billingsley was so impressed with the show, that week he came up to me and said, "You know, if you ever need any help with the turntables or anything, I wouldn't mind giving you a hand." I thought about it for a second and I said, "Well, cool, man, we'll give it a shot." At the end of my 10th grade year, my mom decided to celebrate my 16th birthday on June 10th instead of March 10th. I handed out a bunch of invitations and to my surprise, a lot of people showed up. I set up the turntables near the swimming pool and we all took turns DJing our favorite music as well as rapping some of our originals. From that moment on, Vince and I worked on music more and more. One night while we were taking a break, we tried to come up with a name for a group. I don't really know where it came from, but all of a sudden I said, traumatized. And there was a silence, and I said, not traumatized, traumatize, like family ties. And then he said, yeah, I like that, man, I like that. And you know, it was sometime after that, we just ended up bumming out, man. And next morning we woke up and first thing we said was, traumatized. Going into our junior year, we had practiced a lot, and we were ready to start doing gigs. That was the year I met Lee Pageant. He was an inspiration to me because he was a drummer in a band, and he also did studio work. Lee started to mentor me about the business, and he told me in order to get gigs successfully, you needed to have a demo tape. Lee looked out for us and gave us a heads up on a show he was putting together. Traumatized was definitely in, and I was able to showcase my music once more that year. This time, Vince Billingsley, aka Deep Hatred, was backing me up on the ones and twos. At the beginning of 1995, we checked out this store called Fox Music. We looked at this drum machine. It was called the Boss DR5. Shannon Woods helped guide us towards more professional gear. For the first time, we started thinking about making new songs and writing to our own beats. The very first song we produced was called Trauma Child. It spoke about our similarities and how we both grew up without our biological fathers in our lives. We worked on 3 more songs for the rest of the school year. That summer we worked hard and pulled our money together so we could buy this 4-track recorder made by Vestex. I turned my bedroom into a studio. Even though the closet wasn't very big, we were able to convert it into a vocal booth. We had everything we needed to make our own demo tape. By December of '95, we had the 4-song EP completed. It was entitled God Be With You. Jerome Delane from Trifinity Productions helped out with all the photography, album covers, and just being down for whatever. Rick Ivey, who we met through Jerome, helped us out with all the promotion and also video work. In the beginning of 1996, we were only 6 months away from graduation. I guess that whole year was about graduation for me. Having God Be With You completed was like graduation for all the hard work that I put into my music over the years, just keeping the dream alive. With that being said, we took that tape and we ran with it as long as we could, doing various shows and events that we would hear about along the way. We gave a copy of that tape to WPAL 100.9. The program director, Jay Jackson, took it into a room and he listened to it. He said he liked it and he was going to play it that weekend. Sure enough, that Saturday he played It's a Cold World. I almost had a heart attack when I heard the song on the radio. To top it all off, during the graduation practice ceremony, Jay Hampton, the principal, was shaking my hand and he said, I expect to hit record out of you someday. For once, people will respect me for who I was and who I was trying to become. In the fall of '96, I was planning on attending Charleston Southern University. Something wasn't right though. Maybe I was feeling like with all that had happened in the last couple years, that I was abandoning my original dream. Most people would tell you college is the way to go, but I knew there was no guarantee. Against my mother's wishes, I tore up the tuition papers and I told her I'm not going to college and that's final. Starting out, I got a job at Kmart. I was a cart puller for all of 2 weeks. That was the worst job I'd ever had. Mom knew I hated it and finally she said, why don't you try working at the car wash? So I went down there and filled out an application, and the next week I started at Cactus Car Wash. It didn't pay much at first, but at least on the front line there was a chance you could get tips. For the first time in my life, I had a fistful of money and it felt good. That December, I met Teresa Evans, who later became my girlfriend. In October of 1997, my life took a turn for the worst. Teresa and I had been going strong for a while, but she started to feel like she might be holding me back. Knowing my potential, she decided that it would be best if we just broke off the relationship. To make matters worse, that same month, Deep Hatred and I had a falling out, and Traumatized was put on hold. Early on in November of '97, the idea for Life Expectancy came to mind. I started producing songs at the rate of 3 songs per month. By March, I was ready to find a studio and get it recorded. This time I was going to go all out. I wanted professional CD quality, no more tapes. For Christmas, I got the new mini disc Walkman, which gave you the capability to record live audio using a microphone. I recorded a lot of samples and random thoughts of conversations with family and friends. This helped me complete the idea for Life Expectancy.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Being in the local music scene provided me with contacts. I knew Jerome from the band Shaman Mary. He told me about this guy named Jason Benton from Liquid Records. I gave Jason a call to set up some studio time. As soon as everything was recorded and mixed down, he suggested that I get it professionally mastered. He gave me the number of Steve Green from Island Sound Recordings. After Steve polished it up and got it ready for radio, I eventually ordered 300 CDs from disc makers. I remember waiting for the CD order to come in. On my days off, I'd ride down to Anchor Sign and visit my old friend Jerome Delane. I filled out an application while I was there and they sent me down to do a drug test. A couple days later, Shane Lasby calls me back and says you passed the drug screening and we could really use you if you want the job. Come on in on Monday. Now see, I was in a predicament because the CDs were being shipped to the car wash. It was a Friday and it was my day off and they called me up and said we're short-handed. They really need me to come in. But I was tired of playing the hero and I said, man, I ain't coming in no way, no how. Half hour later, Devin, the cashier, calls up and says, hey, I just wanted you to know that your CDs came in. I said, cool, I'm on my way. And I was so happy to be leaving there after 2 years. I enjoyed the rest of my weekend and Monday morning, I started fresh and clean at Anchor Sign. Immediately I started to promote the album. My friend George Garrett, who I met at the car wash, stepped up to help out with image and press kit. Cat's Music and Millennium Music made it possible for me to get store visibility through consignment. Millennium Music had a submission for the upcoming local artist sampler. I was going to be the first rapper to ever be featured on that album. Once all that was in place, I gave 10 copies to WPAL 100.9. Jay Jackson listened to the album and he said he liked it. He was going to feature it on a world premiere. My plan worked. Giving away promotional copies increased the buzz. Looking back at old photos, I realized that I'd always had a fort. Maybe that was God's way of preparing me for the stewardship of my own studio. In November of '98, my mom, my sister Rana, and me moved into a house down the street. The property had a 20 by 30 garage in the backyard. The deal was, in exchange for taking the smallest bedroom, I could use the entire garage. I looked at that building in the backyard and I said, that's the new studio. First, I designed the floor plan. After I knew all the materials I needed, I began constructing the walls. About that time, my friend James Stewart came in to help out with the electrical and the drywall. By March of '99, I had added the finishing touches, and I was ready to start producing my new album at On Track Records. 1999 was a year of reunions. I remember one day my brother Nick called me out of the blue. I almost didn't call him back, but in my mind, I heard a voice say, as we forgive those who've trespassed against us. With that conviction, I immediately went to the phone and gave him a call. I was kind of surprised to hear he had progressed with his music and that he was recording too. That eventually led to the reuniting of my brother Mitch as well. In the summer, Mitch invited me to take a trip with him back to Nebraska to see our grandma. While we were there, we visited our sister Stephanie, and wouldn't you know it, I also ran into Tammy Sayers again. When we got back, I made an effort to reunite with my dad and give him a new chance, being that we haven't talked since I'd been 12 years old. It was kind of awkward at first, but we eventually got through it. I'm really glad to have made peace with my family, and that they're still with me to this day. At the end of 1999, my brother Nick and I decided to combine our studios under one roof. Now we were able to facilitate rap artists as well as live bands. The one artist that stands out most in my mind was Rob Dupree, aka Exponent 7. The thing about his music was it was all Christian based. Up until this moment, I'd never heard anything like it. This eventually prompted me to ask Rob, who is Jesus and who is God? I was kind of confused and I didn't know who we were supposed to pray to. That's when he started doing Bible study and he explained it through the Holy Trinity. I remember one day he was explaining the sinner's prayer. He said the only way was through Jesus Christ. I looked at him and I said, let's do it. I gave my life to Christ on May 8th, 2000. It's just amazing how, even as a sinner, God's love was calling me back to him the whole time. A lot of people never knew that my second album, Think Twice, was actually completed in 2000. But because there was elements of negativity and ideas that would have potentially led people astray, I took that DAT mixdown and I threw it against the brick wall and destroyed it. At that moment, I started over with a clean slate. Toward the end of 2000, my brother Nick and I weren't seeing eye to eye with the direction that the studio was going. We parted ways and he took his equipment back and set it up in his house. I couldn't do much with my recording machine because it was basically a glorified 4-track with 2 additional stereo tracks. The ability to record live bands was definitely out of the picture. Luckily, I met a guy named Dave Gass from Musicians Exchange. His store made it possible to buy, sell, and trade musical equipment. Dave pulled out the blue book and gave me top dollar for all my used equipment. Soon after that, Dwayne Greenhill called me up from Fox Music. He was so excited to tell me about this new digital workstation they just got in. It was the Yamaha AW4416. At first glance, I could tell it was exactly what I needed. You should never test God, but after calculating the price for all the equipment I wanted to upgrade to, I said, God, give me $10,000. See what I'll do with it. 2 credit cards had given me limit increases, and with all my combined cards, I realized that I had $10,000. I prayed hard about it, and that week I went down to Fox Music and put my money where my mouth is. Almost immediately, bands were calling me off the hook, wanting to set up studio time. From 2001 to 2003, a lot of music groups came to my studio. My dad put together a 4-song EP entitled End of Our Roads. 3 of those songs were recorded with my brother Nick, and I helped produce the title track. Deep Hatred and I worked out our differences, and Traumatized managed to complete a 6-song EP entitled A Broken Foundation. Most of these projects were completed and never promoted. The lack of time and resources kept us from getting too far. However, it wasn't all in vain. In those years, I gained the skills and knowledge of how to successfully record, mix, and master great music. In the spring of 2003, I started to notice a pain in my abdomen. I had health insurance, but I guess I was a little scared to find out what it was. It turned out I had a hernia. What seemed to be a simple procedure led to something more serious when Dr. Pardick reviewed my x-rays. He ordered an immediate MRI and postponed the hernia surgery. The MRI confirmed evidence of an aneurysm in my chest. I was then referred to Dr. Economides at MUSC in Charleston, who broke the news to me when he said, "Adam, if you don't get this surgery, you will die." From that vantage point, the future looked grim. It was bad enough I was told I might die, but when I seen the price of the deductible I'd have to pay up front, I had no choice but to charge my life on a MasterCard. The surgery took place a week later. I left Deep Hatred with a list of phone numbers just in case I didn't make it through. When it was time to go, they wheeled me down a dark corridor into a room, and all I remembered was the Beach Boys playing on the radio. When I woke up in the ICU, the first person I saw was my dad. When they transferred me to a recovery room, the doctors were concerned about my voice. They had an ENT specialist take a look at my throat, and it was confirmed that my left vocal cord was paralyzed during the operation. After a year of rehabilitation, I struggled to get my focus back. I was backlogged in the studio trying to finish everybody's projects, and all I wanted to do was be able to finish my own. Eventually, sleep deprivation caught up with me. One morning I overslept and the clock said 9:30. When I called into work, my supervisor Jason Tidwell told me not to bother coming in, that I had just fired myself. For the first time since graduation, I had no job, and I was all on my own. Since I had a little money saved up, I decided to take a hiatus and just work on Think Twice. I learned my way around the guitar and also experimented with the harmonica. Several people guest appeared on this album, which diversified the entire project and made every song unique. Using digital turntables, it had that true hip-hop feel that we remember from songs recorded in the 80s and the 90s. I recorded new vocals for every song and accepted my new voice. In March of 2005, I was relieved to finally say that the Think Twice album was finished. Made it hard to breathe. Real hard to breathe. It's all getting all this in.
Yeah.
Don't try it at home.
The car just stalled in the middle of the road.
I meant its production. I told you.
We played One Wild Party. You know, I thought that's interesting because it happened to me.
Yeah.
You see it in the movies, you know. Kind of like in Roadhouse, you know.
Yeah.
You see Roadhouse and just throwing beer bottles at it. I mean, that actually kind of happened to me. It's for real.
Comes in, I used to support my man Supreme, my man Hippo. Time waits for no man, come to March 06.
Crazy.
Everybody has fear, but the thing I noticed is after fear comes faith. And you gotta get past the fear before you can get to the faith. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Let's get into it.
On Track Records.
Perfect.
I knew I could pull it together. Just that. But they had faith. They call them martyrs, and they would not denounce God. If anyone would have said, "Oh, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in all this," they would have been taken back. But they said no. They had the faith.